call the meeting to order. Mr.
Thank you, Your
Clarke.
Worship. Welcome, everyone. First item this evening is the 2010 financial statements. I'd like to invite the Manager of Financial Services to come forward and give a presentation.
Okay.
Ms. McLeod.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here tonight to present to you our 2010 annual report. This report, along with the DCC report and the Statement of Financial Information report that are a little bit later in your agenda tonight, will wrap up the statutory reporting requirements for 2010 and officially put it behind us. Each of you probably noticed at your chair you have our new annual report in a little folder. We have to say a great big thank you to our corporate communications department because they helped us to make this look very beautiful. And you'll notice that we've tried something a little bit new this year. When you open it up, our annual report has been divided into 3 different parts. We have on the left-hand side the front-end document with all the pictures and all the accomplishments and all the sort of things that most people are probably interested in looking at. In the center, we have the traditional financial statements that probably only people like me are interested in looking at. And then on the far side, we have a small highlight summary that has also been given quite a facelift. So if you want to take it out and, take it with you when you go to meetings, things like that, probably very helpful. So 2010 was a really good year for the city, both from a financial perspective and from our work plan. As in other years, our work plan is focused on our 5 strategic goals: to strengthen neighborhoods, to expand local jobs, to increase participation, to enhance our infrastructure and our services, and to achieve excellence. And I'm happy to report that we have done some progress on all of those goals. On the first one, related to strengthening neighborhoods, there are a lot of details in the front section of that annual report, but I'm going to skip through just a few highlights in the interest of time. This year, our RCMP department took down 18 marijuana grow operations. Our environmental group launched the Green Can program to collect food waste and divert them from the landfill into composting. And our fire department responded to over 5,800 emergency calls. The measure we have for this particular goal is quality of life in Coquitlam, and our survey tells us that 96% of residents in Coquitlam feel that the quality of life in Coquitlam is either good or very good. So that's something nice to hear. In terms of expanding local jobs, this year Council established an economic advisory committee to try and take advantage and tap into the talent that we have living right here in Coquitlam. Our QNet, that's the city-owned company, signed up their first telecom service provider, which is a primary goal for them. And Council approved the 2010 land management strategies, which focuses on city-owned lands. So our measure for this particular goal is the number of business licenses issued, and that was up 3% in 2010 over 2009, as well as the total construction value, which is at a 5-year high in 2010. So that turned out pretty okay, too. The next goal is to increase participation, and in the same light of tapping into that local talent in the community, Council established a sport advisory council, a cultural advisory council, and we also had 2 fantastic celebrations in the community this year. We had the torch relay in February to go along with the Olympics, and we also had our Canada Day celebration. Both of these celebrations brought out over 20,000 people in the community, which is kind of a really nice thing. And the Canada Day one was, of course, so good that we're going to be doing it again in about 10 days' time, which is kind of nice. Our measure on this particular goal is to look at how citizens participate in active activities. And based on our survey, the average participation rate for Coquitlam residents is 4 times a week, which I find that wonderful. So this next goal, enhance sustainability of our services and infrastructures. To be perfectly honest, this is the one that I think the city really achieved excellence on. We really hit this one because we did a lot of work this year. You can see the beautiful picture of our new Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex. That complex was opened this year, and we celebrated our grand opening. But it was opened, and it never really shut down while we were in construction, which is kind of pretty impressive. It was finished about 10 months early, and it was well under budget, so that's a good thing. Another really impressive infrastructure thing we did was we accessed $17 million worth of infrastructure grants. As part of the federal government's response to sort of the downturn in the economy was a stimulus program where there was funding available if you applied and came up with the matching money. And Coquitlam was really successful in this, and we got $17 million into our paving program and did 4 times the amount of work as usual. So that was pretty impressive on the infrastructure side. Also, our Parks Division, you can't sort of forget about that green infrastructure. We planted over 3,000 trees. Approximately 500 of them are street trees, and I know some of them are in the middle lane in Low Heat Highway when I drive to work, and I just love it because they're all out in bloom now. It looks really great. Anyway, our measure for this one is overall satisfaction with city services, and our survey tells us that 90% of Coquitlam residents are satisfied or very satisfied with the quality and level of services in the city. So, kind of good news. The final goal is to achieve excellence in governance, and this one's a little harder to measure because, you know, we all try to be excellent all the time, but sometimes you hit the mark, sometimes you don't. One of the ways that we check to make sure is that we look at what kind of grants, what kind of awards we get, where we have external third parties verifying that maybe we're doing the right thing, we're meeting best practices. And in 2010, I should say 2010, our ICT department got a UBCM award for QNet and for the concept of QNet. We also completed phase 1 of our website redevelopment, and we got 3 government finance awards for outstanding achievement. So our measure for this particular goal is taxpayer confidence, and our taxpayers, 81% of our taxpayers say they get good or very good value for their tax dollars, which is kind of nice. So that's the work plan portion of the presentation. On to the financial highlights. One of the biggest highlights, I think, for this year is Council will probably remember that we started the year with a shortfall of revenue in our budget, about $1.5 million because of low interest rates. And throughout the year, all departments were asked to tighten their belts, pull back, and try to make sure that we hit the mark. In the end, what happened was development revenues picked up in the latter half of the year, and we ended up achieving a small surplus, about 2%. But we sort of turned a bad situation around into a very positive place. The next highlight, of course, as we've already talked about a little bit, was the grant funding. Not only did we get $17 million for roadworks, we also got some money for the track resurfacing over at Town Centre at Percy Perry Stadium and the roof replacement, which was kind of nice. And, of course, we did manage to get an unqualified audit opinion. And what that means is that our auditors, the external checkers of what we do, agree that the financial statements that are in your package properly represent what happened in the year. So that's always a good thing. Looking at our balance sheet, the first item on our balance sheet is, of course, cash balance of $195 million. That is a little bit higher than the previous year. It was about $183. It's up primarily because of that increase in developer revenue at the end of the year. You can see our developer contributions are up, as well as our performance deposits, and that counts for most of what was extra at the end of the year. And I know that for most people, $195 million seems like an awful lot of money, and we should be able to do anything that we want, but as you can see where this is outlined, most of that money is allocated to very specific things. And you have to bear in mind that the city has one major payday a year, and it comes up in July. And in December, we have 6 months to go, and our payroll is about $1 million a week. So you need to have some cash at this time of year. Our capital asset balance is a whopping $1.6 billion. That's the depreciated value of all of the land and the buildings and the roads and the pipes and the vehicles that we use every day to provide services to the community. And that has increased, there's an important part to this, that has increased by almost $70 million this year by the things that the city budgeted to build. But it increased a further $30 million by things that developers built and turned over to us, that we're now responsible for. So that's one of the biggest challenges we have in our budget every year. When we take on all these assets, they're great for our community, but we have a responsibility to operate them, maintain them, and replace them when they get to the end of their useful life. So it's one of the challenges that we face. Related to those assets, our balance sheet also shows liabilities of $34 million, which I know sounds like an awful lot of money, But when you compare $34 million to an asset balance of $1.6 billion, that comes out to be about 2%. So to put that in perspective that people will understand, that would be like having a mortgage of $500,000 for the average home in Coquitlam that was $10,000. Like you'd be almost ready to have your party. This year, that debt grew by $11 million for two different things. The first thing, we increased our long-term debt for the expansion and widening of Coast Meridian Road. What we wanted to do was advance that project to take advantage of all the work that Port Coquitlam had done leading up to that same road. That was a project that was meant to be paid for by development because it's growth related. So what we did was there was another a federal stimulus program where CMHC had money to loan at low interest rates. And so we applied and we got an amazing rate for a 15-year loan, which will be entirely paid by development fees. There'll be no tax dollars repaying that debt. So we got the project done early. We got a really low interest rate. It was about 3%, 15 years, which is quite amazing. Right now the going rate's about 4.5% for long-term debt, so that was really good. The second thing that we borrowed for was $8 million. We had an opportunity to access that paving money. In order to get most grants, you have to match the money. And in this particular case, in order for us to do an $18 million road paving program, we needed to come up with 12. The federal government was going to give us $6 million free if we came up with 12. We had 3 in our regular paving program. We got an extra $1 million for various and sundry things from ICBC, and we borrowed the last 8. And the interest cost for that $8 million, which will be paid out of our normal repaving program over the next 4 years, will be about $600,000. So for $600,000, we got $6 million for free. So that's what I call good debt. So last number on our balance sheet is our accumulated surplus, which is $1.72 billion. Don't get too excited because that is not a cash surplus. That mostly is the equity we own in our assets. That means we own our assets without debt. So it's not really as exciting as it might initially sound. So the actual amount of money we have set aside is we have about $16 million for operating reserves. That's things like our insurance fund, our snow and ice removal fund, our tax appeal fund, things that are absolutely necessary to our operations. We have money set aside for capital. That's our land sale reserve, our development cost charges, our vehicle reserve, things that we are absolutely going to need in the future. The only money that's unallocated is that $40 million surplus, and 2/3 of that belongs to our utilities. So we have about $15 million of money set aside, not allocated, that's there for emergencies, in case we need it. Hopefully we'll plan well enough that we won't. At the end of the year, the city contributed to that $40 million surplus with about $5 million across all funds, and 3.4 of that was from the general fund. That was because at the end of everybody pulled back, and at the end of the year we got some extra development revenue. It turned out quite well. $3.4 million sounds like a lot of money, but again, that's 2%. That means we're 98% spent. Any closer than that gets a little unnerving, especially for the finance people. The good thing about that is Council has excellent policy around what to do with that surplus. That money goes right into an infrastructure reserve to help us with unanticipated infrastructure needs, things like roof replacements. Last year, we had to actually replace the roof up at the Poirier Library unexpectedly, and fortunately, this fund paved the way for us to do that. And it will be there again for us in the future. Early in 2011, though, Council made some choices about what to do with some of that money. We contributed about $1 million of that money toward our vehicle reserve because we know that we have a number of fire trucks that need to be replaced in the next few years, and we're a little bit short of the money that we need. So that will give that fund a little bit of a boost, and we can replace our fire trucks on time. The other thing we contributed to was our tax appeal fund. So the cash is still sitting in reserve, waiting for necessary things that we have to spend it on. But our tax appeal reserve has been depleted to 0 over the last couple of years because we've had some very expensive tax appeals, and that's a dangerous place for us to be because we're faced with tax appeals every year. And next year will be no different. So looking at the city's revenue and expenditure statement, revenues for the year totaled $252 million, which is kind of interesting in itself. It's a little larger than normal. 70% of that revenue came from 2 sources, taxation and fees for specific services. Normally that percentage is closer to 80. And the reason it's different this year is because there's a couple of pieces of the pie that got quite a bit bigger. The first one is grants, because of all the infrastructure money that we got. That little wedge of the pie got bigger. And developer contributions. that got bigger, so the proportions get a little smaller. Our expenses were $183 million, and they were distributed as usual. The largest area of expenditure was Parks, Rec, and Culture. I should update my slide there. Followed by our utilities and our protective services. So those of you who are really good at math will have gone, 252 million and 183 million, there's some $70 million missing. That would be our capital program, because our expenditures, the way our financial statements are reported now, don't include capital expenditures. So we didn't just misplace it. It really did get spent. So what does all this mean? What it means is we've come through a couple of really tough years where revenues were hard to find, and we've weathered it quite well and ended up in a reasonably good financial position. 2011 is looking a little bit better. We started the year with our budget in much, much better shape, and development revenues for the year have picked up, and they're doing really well. You know, we know there'll always be challenges out there. And, you know, you're never going to have enough resources and time and money to give everybody everything that they want. But you know what? We do a pretty good job, and we hit most of it right most of the time. So, with that, are there any questions?
Thank you. There probably will be when we get to item 17. Oh, Councillor Reid.
I just wanted to comment on something that a lot of the folks that are listening might not understand. And up till a few years ago, we really didn't have any big issues, and that's the tax appeal fund. And that can hit many cities. Indeed, I remember being at the UBCM, was it last year, when a couple of the cities on the island got hit with when the paper mills appealed their taxes. It indeed almost bankrupted a couple of the cities over there. So I wonder, just if you don't mind, if you just go through what we had in the tax appeal account and how we lost it, perhaps. It might be a good idea, because people don't even understand it's out there. I think everyone knows that your taxes are too high, wow, I'll go and appeal them, but for the average homeowner, it wouldn't be anywhere near the amount that hit us last year.
Sure. Everybody, your taxes that you pay are a combination of the value of your home, your assessment, and the tax rate that's set by council. And people have the right to appeal their assessment. And so what happens is every year there are a vast number of appeals. Most of them, they're not terrible. They're quite small, a few $1,000s here. They relate to a person's house taxes. But normally the city would carry, or as long as I've been here, we've carried a tax appeal reserve in the range of $1 million. Because about every 3 or 4 years, there's some big commercial appeal. And what happens is sometimes they take a long time to sort out, because there's an appeal process that sometimes can span multiple years. And by the time it gets sorted out, we have to pay back the taxes for several years. Well, if you took that hit in any year, that would really damage our ability to provide services. So we have this tax appeal reserve in the range of about $1 million. Well, over the last couple of years, I think about 3 years ago, IKEA had a tax appeal about their building, and we lost a lot of money on that one. We probably lost more than $500,000 because it was a couple of $100,000 for several years. And so, of course, any reserve fund is one-time money. It's come out of savings or something that you've set aside because you had a little savings, but once you deplete that, it's gone. And so that took out about half of it. And we've also had a big tax appeal adjustment related to Catalyst paper, which has taken out the other half. So we're down to a tax appeal fund that was zero. And council made the decision to use some of that surplus to prop up that fund to reduce the risk of tax appeals hitting us in the future. And in my opinion, that's a very prudent decision. Good thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do want to thank all of your staff for the work they've done to put this together, and we'll undoubtedly be talking more about it later on in the agenda.
Great, thank you very much. And just before I sit down, I just would like to say a very big thank you to the staff in the Finance Department, and a huge thank you to our Corporate Communications Group who helped us make this look so very pretty. Thank you.
Great pictures.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Nicholson for comments before we move on the agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt the regular agenda. I wanted to talk for a couple of minutes about something that I think has probably touched everyone in the room, and that's cancer. 2 weeks ago, we had the Relay for Life up at Town Centre Stadium, an event that was started here in Coquitlam that is still the largest relay for life in the country, raised $587,000 that day, and a good part of that due to our own team, Coquitlam. I'm not sure if they have a captain, but if I ever want to know anything about the team, I go to Sheena McLeod, who was just talking to us. And it was a marvelous day and a great piece of work. More recently, this past weekend, the BC Cancer Foundation's Ride to Conquer Cancer took 2,879 people on a 2-day ride on bicycles from here to Seattle and raised $11.1 million. I talked to the people at the BC Cancer Foundation this morning, and they told me that it was going to be challenging for them to dig up any stats for me because all their staff were taking the day off because they were exhausted from what they had done over the weekend. I pointed out that Councillor Robinson was planning to be here tonight, even though she'd been on that ride. There were 84 people from Coquitlam involved in the ride and 159 from the Tri-Cities. It was a fabulous piece of work, contribution to a really important cause. I'm not somebody who gets on a bicycle. My contribution consists of trying to support those who are prepared to do that. And I brought something along so we could all remember to be particularly kind to Councillor Robinson tonight. And I think she might like to tell us a little bit. She's closer to the experience. She knows what it takes to go through that. So I'll walk around there while she's talking. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Robinson,
sweet.
tell us about a wonderful ride, undoubtedly an exhausting ride.
Thank you. Oh, this is fabulous. Thank you very much. It was, I'm touched. I'm going to put these somewhere.
Where you can see past them. So
Yeah, I can see past them. They're a little bit too high. The thing that was inspiring was not so much those who I would say were particularly fit. The fit people who could do this 2-day ride were just doing the 2-day ride. It was the folks, it was a fellow who had a prosthetic leg. It was the person who had balance issues who was riding on a tricycle, special built tricycle, riding 250 kilometers over 2 days. It was the older folks who were really challenged and spent 12 hours on their bike trying to get through. So those were the folks that certainly inspired me. And then, of course, it's all the folks who have endured hours and hours of chemotherapy and radiation. And it was a cold, miserable, blustery winter day as we did this ride this weekend. And what certainly got me through it was thinking about all those who've endured countless painful and uncomfortable treatments. And this was nothing compared to that. So my team got through there, and we had a fabulous time. And together we raised over $11 million. It's a really inspiring event, and I would invite all of council and our staff who might be interested to join us next year for the 2012 Ride to Conquer Cancer.
Well, all of our council colleagues wished you well and are very proud of the work you did on the weekend. I myself, just before this meeting, mentioned that I'm fully prepared to jump on my bike next year, and you ruled me out, and I don't blame you. Now that I'm back on 2 wheels, it's an electric hybrid bicycle because I don't bike very well anymore. But the battery I don't think would last as far as Bellingham. So I think I'd be all on my own, and I don't know that that would do me well. But we're all so proud of you, and Selena, for the work you've done, and for the almost 100 Coquitlam residents, and for the hundreds of Coquitlam residents who took part in Relay for Life this year, and hundreds, thousands more who've done it in past years, for loved ones, for people that they know, people in their families who've been touched by cancer. And so, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Nicholson, for your eloquence. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 2 is the minutes of the Town Hall meeting held Saturday, May 7th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 16th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favour? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, May 30th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favour? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 30th. Recommendations to approve.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 6 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, June 13th. The recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 7 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, June 13th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 30th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We've got a lot of meetings.
I'd like to thank the people in my office for all of that work.
Exactly. They've done a good job with the minutes.
Item 9 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, June 13th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting pertains to an application for zoning amendment bylaw 4225, and this is at 527 Poirier Street and 1714 Haversley Avenue. Recommendations give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4225 and that this bylaw be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9.3 is fourth and final reading for OCP Amendment Bylaw 4185 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4186. These pertain to a proposed subdivision at 3450 to 3469 Galloway Avenue. The recommendations give fourth and final reading to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4185 and fourth and final reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4186.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Aspenson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9.4 is a proposed work plan schedule to complete the Maillardville Neighbourhood Plan. Recommendations that Council endorse the proposed schedule for completion of the plan and that that they approve proposed additional representatives to the Maillardville Neighbourhood Plan Public Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 30th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10.3, considered by that committee and recommended by them, concerns a public art program plan. Recommendations to approve the public art program plan and that Council consider identifying funding for public art opportunities as part of the annual budget process.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
In a similar vein, one of our advisory committees made this recommendation, and it was supported by the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee. This is that Council consider as part of the annual budget process funding for a public art reserve of $25,000 to $50,000 annually.
Moved by Councillor Robinson. Seconded by Councillor Nicholson. I gather there will be some discussion. Maybe not. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Councillors Reamer, McDonnell, and myself, and Councillor Sikora are opposed. Oops, Councillor Asmusson's opposed as well. That motion fails. Is there another motion? It might be in order to that Council consider as part of the annual budget process the question of funding for public art reserve.
Yep.
Councillor McDonnell had a question. It was moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor McDonnell.
Well, on the previous motion there before, we put funding off for part of the annual budget process, and that's good enough for me. We don't need to identify specific, in my opinion anyways, we don't need to identify specific funding opportunities before they arise.
Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I voted in favor of both recommendations, 10.3 and 10.5.2. I didn't see 10.5.2 as being contradictory to 10.3, but merely a little more specific, and it simply means that there's a number in mind when the 2012 budget process begins. What that number ultimately becomes is all part of the 2012 budget process. The outcome of that process will be what it will be. I don't think we need an additional motion to deal with the recommendation from the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. It failed, but 10.3 stands, and funding for public art will be part of the 2012 budget process. Thank you.
Yep, fair comment. Councillor Reid.
Just ditto to what I just was reading, number 2, and ditto. So I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, I'm going to ask for consensus on the withdrawal of a motion. Councillor Reid, I don't see any objection to that.
Covered.
We'll consider that motion having not been made, since it's covered by 10.3, which we passed a moment ago. Mr. Clarke. I don't see any other motions. Councillor Support, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I did want to comment. The fact is, the most dangerous thing we can do here in the council chambers is start having different committees, and that's the problem. When you pick committee chairs, they want to do well for their own committee, and I understand that very well. And they start coming up with the funding that you have to have for a budget, or something that should be discussed in a budget. And I think that that should not be allowed. The fact is that, different chairmen, I mean, can you imagine if Councillor McDonnell, who's chair of the Parks and Recreation, said, I need 10 million for this, and it should be in an annual budget on a yearly basis, and so on. And then Councillor Grant Adamson would say, I need 20 million for certain infrastructure in engineering and stuff, and so on. Then why have a budget altogether, discuss it? But that's the most dangerous thing in the world, and that's the first time I've seen in 40 years that there's some chair that's bringing forward something in their committee that should be funded on a yearly basis. And I don't mind discussing on our budget time about anything and everything. I think that's the process, and that's where it should be. And I don't think for 1 minute that we should be in the middle of the year saying that there'd be 25,000 or 50,000 put away for arts or whatever it is. Thank you very much.
I just want to correct one element of it. This is a recommendation of a committee. I believe the chair of the committee, Councillor McDonnell, voted against the recommendation just a few minutes ago. So it's kind of hard to blame him for the recommendation since he necessarily doesn't support it. I'm going to go to Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, and those are my words exactly, that these are recommendations that came from the committee. We've shifted our committee structure a little bit, and I've identified experts in our community, people who have a particular knowledge set, and this was their recommendation, and all the committee chair does is bring forward their recommendations. If council doesn't support it, then council doesn't support it. But we've invited these community experts to come forward and to share with us what they know, and the recommendation from this group of experts was that in order to build a public art policy, a public art infrastructure reserve, or public art reserve, is that we need to start it, and this was their recommendation. It's all we did was bring it forward.
Yep, and it's certainly within the purview of a committee to suggest elements that could be funded. This one was a suggestion of a committee. The budget process is where council gets elected by all the citizens, gets to determine, or has to weigh in on all of the questions of funding for the entire city. And that's, as we've just seen with the financial report, an onerous task. Seeing no other comments, there's no other motion. We will move on then. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 11 pertains to the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, June 13th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns a request for an expression of interest, and this is for commercial opportunities at Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex. The recommendations that Council approve an expression of interest be issued in order to explore private sector interest, and 2, that approve the ongoing utilization of the second floor fitness studio for fitness programming and rentals to user groups.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. We have some pretty nice facilities in our city, and I think we should always be looking for opportunities to complement and enhance. This is going around tonight, and enhance our services to our residents, as well as offsetting operational costs of running these facilities. I'm in full favor of this recommendation.
Okay. Seeing no other speakers, motion is to look for some private sector opportunities. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities, and Environment Standing Committee meeting of Monday, May 30th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12.3 pertains to a proposed UBCM resolution, and this is about Diking Districts. The recommendation is that Council endorse the proposed resolution and forward a copy of it for consideration at UBCM convention in September.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12.4 pertains to water main replacements on Golden Drive and Clarke Road. Two-part recommendations to approve the replacement of the water mains in Golden Drive in the amount of $630,000 and near Clarke Road in the amount of $1.1 million, and that funding be approved from the Water Utility Surplus Reserve.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Question through to Mr. Suzak. This plastic pipe that's being proposed to put in down at Golden, where the ground is a little corrosive, is this pipe going to last any plastic pipe going to last any longer than a cement, or should it be treated with something, or what exactly is the problem down there?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. The water mains down in that area were made of material that corroded. Plastic pipe is not expected to corrode. That's why we're switching the materials over to plastic. We don't expect the same problems. The nature of the construction there has resulted in a situation where the water mains have deteriorated much more rapidly than expected. And we expect to be monitoring that whole subdivision area over the next number of years to determine whether or not more is needed. But for now, this is all we feel that we need to proceed with.
And thank you very much. For up on Clarke Road, what's the urgency on this? I understand that we'd like to get this done before the Evergreen line starts to happen, but I'm not so sure that I think that we may have some leeway on that. So, yeah. Is there a pressing urgency for this?
Yeah, thanks. Through Your Worship, there is not an immediate pressing urgency. There will be when the Evergreen line is announced, and we would not be constructing this until we've got word that actually Evergreen is going to happen. But at least we'll have the funding envelope in place. It is necessary to replace that water main. There have been some recent break histories. We don't want to have an aging old water main ultimately underneath brand new curb and gutter or brand new sidewalk or special finishes. So that's why we want to get in there and replace that water main, provided, of course, the Evergreen line goes. And we're all expecting that to happen, and we intend to time the work to get in there subsequent to the announcement, but before the province starts work.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. See no other questions. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 13 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities, and Environment Standing Committee meeting of Monday, June 13th. Recommendations to receive.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item rising out of that committee's meeting pertains to the Coquitlam Fraser Greenway. It's a status report. The recommendation from the committee is that Council direct staff to continue planning the hybrid route concept as the preferred alignment for the Fraser Greenway in order to connect the Newport Man Bridge with the Central Valley Greenway in New Westminster.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Asmundson, and I believe our most avid cyclist has something to say. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. And yes, I think my thighs would suggest that I am an avid cyclist. I'm wondering if Council would have an appetite to defer this item. I know that a number of Council members have asked for a tour of the area to take a better look at the VACC proposal to get a better grip on exactly what some of the issues are, what some of the challenges are with their proposal. And I'm hoping that majority of Council would support me in just putting this off until we can get a better handle on what it is exactly that VACC is looking to do.
Okay. The motion is to defer pending a tour, council tour, and then bring it back to council. I assume we're back to the committee.
Yep.
Okay. Back to council. So it would be Councillor McDonnell on the motion to defer.
I support that motion to defer. I'm a little concerned when I was reading this report, the disconnect that the VACC has with our staff and with what's going on down in that area. And that area is going to be an important cog for a long time to come. So I would like to go down and see for myself just exactly what they propose and if there can be a compromise reached or just what we can do to accommodate them. So I will support this.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. I won't be supporting the deferral. I think staff have done a good job on this report. I think going down there, looking at today is not what it's going to be in the near future. You've got to remember there's going to be changes in construction. CP rail line is going to be moved over. So the area that you're going to go down and look at today will not be the same as what it will be at the end of construction for the Port Mann Highway project. So you're not going to get an exact read on what's down there. Secondly, as pointed out, these are all private lands that are not expropriable lands that you would have to purchase at, if you could, at market values. So there is interest in that route by Vancouver Cycling Association. The main route is the Lougheed Highway, is the main connector route. The route on that side is for better service for the new Fraser Mills in that area, and this route in its design does not connect through to Fraser Mills well at all. And I think to defer this, go down there, look at something that won't be the same in 2 years' time, because there's nothing we can do right now. And the route goes through some environmentally sensitive compensation areas, once again about CP rail and the rail tracks having to be moved over. While I agree that VCC has some concerns down there, I would also look at council and suggest that if we are going to be spending money, we should be looking at what I think is probably the worst cycling on the route is along the Lougheed Highway in front of Riverview. What we've been talking about, and staff is working on coming back with a report, is the section from Colony Farm down to Orchard. And that area is to have a direct route along the frontage of Riverview because of the dangers of cyclists along that part of Lougheed Highway. It's very, very, very dangerous. That is an area that I think takes the #1 priority in cycling and improving infrastructure in this area, not down here. So I'm not in favor of the deferral, and I think going down there and looking at this today is not what it's going to look like in 2 years from now. So to analyze VAC's report and make a decision by deferring this, you won't be making a decision based on what's going to be like in 2 years' time. Thank you.
Fair enough. I'm going to support the deferral, partly because the motion before us right now is that the council directs staff to continue planning the hybrid route, which is suggested as the preferred alignment, to do something, to continue planning. And the deferral would simply say, no, let's hang on a minute, let's go down and have a look, and then let's decide to continue planning or something else. That doesn't change the priority. I agree with Councillor Asmussen that the section of Lougheed in front of Riverview is a much more pressing challenge related to commuter cycling than this particular route. But the two aren't. But by going ahead with the staff recommendation, which is to continue planning the hybrid route through United Boulevard, that doesn't solve the Riverview lands issue either. So I don't know that we can equate the two. I'm fully prepared to head down there and have a look with council and see firsthand. I've actually been on the properties in question and tried to picture it. I'd rather have staff trying to describe to me where the railway gets moved to and what kind of challenges we've got. And it may well be that we decide that has to be a higher priority than it is now. It may well be that we decide that it's unfeasible. And if that's the case, then off we go and we've made a decision on an informed basis. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, I'm all for saving money, and I certainly don't want to be wasting staff time planning or building a hybrid route if it isn't the concept that we should be going in the end. And I don't know that it is wrong or it's right, and I certainly trust staff. But as someone who loves to take those councillors like me, I'm out and about the community all the time, and I sort of know what's out there. I always force you to go on land use tours. And it makes saving trees, because we save all this paper when we can actually take you out and say, when we're talking about a carriage house, this is one, you know, and we don't have to spend hours explaining it. I think it's really useful, and it's not often engineering comes up with stuff that we can go and look at. You usually hide everything you've got, so you know, you dig a hole, put it in, and then cover it up. So it's going to be kind of fun to actually go down and look at something you're planning that we'll be able to see. I don't know, I don't have a problem supporting this, but I certainly don't have a problem going and looking at it. And just, I would like to see for myself where it's going to go and what we're going to spend our money on. And maybe we don't have to spend the money right now. Maybe we can wait a year or two and do what we want in the end, and maybe fix whatever's in front of the low heat high or Essendale or whatever at the same time. So I don't have a problem deferring it, and but I want to make plain that I certainly trust staff to do their job, and I trust their recommendations. I just know that you have a concern that maybe we're spending money on the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I don't mind taking a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. Well, it's my impression that this is not time sensitive and there'd be no hardship with delaying it a little while, at least to go have a look. My concern has to be, though, that in the report it talks about the VACC alignment is premature at this time, and I'm wondering if we were to do our tour and consider that is the best route, how long would we be delaying the implementation of a route like this, hybrid route?
Mr. Suzak? Nope.
I'll take a first stab at it and then ask Catherine to come in if she has some further thoughts. The Portman Highway 1 project is scheduled for completion sometime in 2013, 2014, and it would be in that timeline, sometime around 2014, that we would come back, take a look and see what room is left, what practicalities are, you know, remaining along this alignment that we can convert into a potential bikeway.
Ms. Mahmoud?
With respect to planning a route like this, there is utility relocations that are also happening with the rail relocation. So there are some significant infrastructure that is being moved around. So in viewing this, we will approach Kiewit and ask them to assist in a council mayor tour of this area to help explain and visualize what is actually going to happen along this area. Subsequent to their schedule, it's really pending Kiewit's schedule and timing for works, but the completion of it, as said, is 2013, 2014. So realistically, one going in after that time period. Planning, of course, can happen in parallel to these works, but the availability of land, we would have to wait until after they've completed their timing.
So I'm not clear. So does that mean that the comparison of the two routes, one would be 2 years later than the other one if we were to go to the VACC option, or are they comparable? It sounds to me like there's a difference of years, and I just wanted to be clear on that.
There are portions of the VACC route that they've proposed that will be occupied by other infrastructure. For another example, the rail line. So there are partial consequences to the VACC route proposed that would involve a change. We're already aware of that, but there's a finite amount of land in that area that would be left over after these works, and that's where the limiting factors come in.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I will certainly support the deferral. I always appreciate going out on the various tours that we've gone out on that May has forced us to go on. So anyway, but I do see some difficulties with the VACC route, and maybe perhaps once I've had an opportunity to actually go down and see, I'll get a better sense of that rather than just trying to imagine myself on a bicycle doing that particular, those two routes. So I will support the deferral. Thank you.
Just for a matter of clarity then, I don't think you'll have to imagine, because I assume that this tour would be on bicycle.
Not likely.
I'm going to suggest Saturday morning at 7:30 on two wheels. Okay.
Enjoy yourself.
Okay, the motion is to defer pending a tour. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora and Councillor Asmundson are opposed. The rest of us are on bikes. Okay, on a tour. Mr. Clerk.
Item 14 is the minute of the Strategic Priorities Administration and Protective Services meeting of Wednesday, May 18th. Recommendations to receive.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. You know, item 14.1, general local election. I think it might be a good idea to put a question to the public, to the taxpayers in this community, to see if our GVD board, or people that represent Coquitlam to the GV board should be elected. You know, I think it'd be a great question to ask our taxpayers, and I think that our taxpayers will be able to respond. What I see, you know, even coming Friday to a board meeting, you know, when you look at their financial, at their employees, and I don't know who sets the salaries, but it looks like even the janitors are making way over $100,000 a year. There's nobody in the GVD under, say, $75,000 to $80,000 a year plus benefits. So I don't know who sets those salaries and that type of deal. And I think with what we've been going through, the fact is to have a board that administrates $800 million budget. $800 million budget. And not one of them is elected on that board. I'll tell you, it's pretty frightening to me. So I'd like to see that. Matter of fact, I'll move that we put a questionnaire to our taxpayers this fall to see if our board should be elected.
Councillor Sikora, this is the motion to approve the minutes. That item's not on the agenda.
I realize that.
Okay, well, you're debating it, that's all. So we're sort of stuck.
I'm following your habits.
Oh, I see. Well, I actually try to stick to the agenda item, and I thank you very much. So do you have any issues with the agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes?
Then you can make the motion.
Do you have any issue with the approval of the minutes?
No.
Okay.
So moved.
The motion is it's on the floor already. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Okay.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. So what I think Councillor Corey was trying to do is move a motion now after the receipt of the minutes. Yes. And I would be willing to second. I think that we missed an opportunity. I'm surprised I didn't make that meeting when we decided we weren't going to have a question. And all the discussions I'd heard after the last election that we had, where we had a question on the ballot, even though it was not a regular election, that we felt at some point it encouraged people to come out and vote, that it created some interest. And I think the question, this is something I've raised every term that I've been on council, the question of how we choose our representatives for Metro. And I know that a lot of people around this council and also throughout the region are interested in how they're being elected. You yourself, Mayor, made the comments that they're not directly elected. And we have brought forward, and I think it needs to be flushed out, so I don't think this is something that we can actually wordsmith right now, but I think it would be appropriate to have a question related to how the Metro Vancouver representatives are elected to the board. And we proposed a couple different options, one being that they get to vote for both the councillors and the mayor on the council, and they also get to say of those people who are elected to council, and then the person with the most votes would then be the ones who are the representative. Or it could be any options. But I think we should at least consider whether or not we can devise a question that would be appropriate to give us some direction on whether or not this is in fact important to anybody other than council. It may not be as important to the rest of the public as we think it is, but I'd certainly be willing to support and then second Councillor Sikora's motion that we entertain a question of that nature on the ballot when we have our elections.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that we're sort of stuck here in between. Council referred this process to a meeting at which Council attended and I guess weighed in on the question of whether or not an appropriate question there was available, and the decision, as was recorded in the minutes, was that there's a long window of opportunity remaining should Council wish to bring the issue back, and I'm perfectly comfortable. In fact, I'll tell you, the governance at the regional level has so many problems that need to be fixed that this is certainly a valid topic for debate among our electorate. Both at TransLink and at Metro Vancouver, there are so many regional governance issues, and Coquitlam is, partly because we're right in the middle of the region, I suspect, we're in the middle of those issues. The United Boulevard extension, the North Fraser Perimeter Road, the issue associated with the TransLink's funding of the Evergreen Line. There are issues at TransLink, the issue with the regional growth strategy at Metro Vancouver, the issue of water at Metro Vancouver. All of those are enormously complex issues, and they deserve a really good governance structure. And I'm afraid I have very little confidence that the governance structure we have right now is as good as we could have, or even good enough to adequately deal with these complex issues. So I'm perfectly in favor of at least sitting down as council and trying to figure out whether that's a question that we could put to the public in November election. That sounds perfectly reasonable. Councillor Reid.
Well, I have probably a different feeling on this. I think after being at Metro for a few years, I think you have to have the interest to go, for one thing. I think some cities do not send their mayor. The mayor is registered as an alternate so that the day-to-day business, the councillors would go, and the mayor would go if something urgent came up, because I mean, you have to look at how many meetings one person can go to in a week. And you have Mayor's Council, you have TransLink Council, I don't know what else, you have a whole bunch of other ones too. So, I mean, there's day-to-day business done at Metro, but then there's some meetings that the mayor would obviously want to be at and not, you know. So I think there's all kinds of scenarios that work themselves out down there. But I think we need to talk to Metro about this. I don't think we should be going off at this particular point in time and making our own decisions and putting it on the ballot as to what we would like to do. I think we're out there all by ourselves for a while now, and I think we need to get over the issue that we've got before we do something else. So as much as I like to say that I think we could all probably do with some shaking up and looking at how we do business in a better and more efficient manner, I think this isn't the right time. If we want to sit down as a council and talk about it, maybe that's fair, but I really think that there's no sense in us being the only city that does business this way. So those are my comments. And the other thing, if you want to address something at Metro, address the amount of money that people get paid for meetings. I think that's totally unnecessary. And you question them and it goes nowhere. So absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to skip over Councillor Sikora because she's already spoken on the issue. I'm going to go to Councillor Nicholson, if I could. And if no one else wants to speak, then we'll go back to Councillor Sikora. Councillor
Thank
Nicholson.
you, Worship. If I understood you correctly in your first response to Councillor Sikora was to suggest that this may very well be something that Council should discuss as an item on the agenda at a forthcoming meeting.
Yes.
Because it's not really properly before us at this point. The most we could do, as I understand it, would be to give notice of motion at the end of the meeting.
That would be my position. The motion was seconded by Councillor Lynch, and so we're sort of...
Well, if it was seconded by Councillor Lynch, it must be appropriate.
And that's what Councillor Lynch thinks. So I'm certainly of the opinion that this is something we ought to discuss. I'm always loath to have a discussion and make a decision at the same meeting when something is first introduced, because we have had no opportunity to consider it as a council and to consider the ramifications and perhaps get some input from staff as to the various models that might be used.
But then perhaps I might move to refer this to our next meeting.
And the motion is to refer, seconded by Councillor Robinson. On the motion to refer, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, I don't mind it being deferred, providing it's being dealt with in there. The fact is that, we have, when I look at what's happening at the Metro, there's one council member that ran up an expense account of $59,000. And one trip was to Honolulu. I wonder if it's to to taste the pineapple juice and the vodka, whether it tastes like our water or not.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of our councils
No,
to say
no,
that.
no, no. I wonder if that was the reason why he went to Honolulu, on a trip, But those are the kind of things that are happening. And boy, I'll tell you something. I sat on both. Back in the 70s, was elected board. Back in the 70s, the board was elected mayor. And the fact is, it was much more efficient, much more accountable. You're accountable to your taxpayers. They put you there. And the fact is, when you ran for election, you ran for either mayor or council member, and you ran for the GVD board. And the taxpayers chose who went. The most votes you get for the GVD is the people that went to the GVD. And I don't mind that at all. I think it's a great way to have somebody that's responsible. We have people sitting on a board on the different committees that are not even on a board. Now, how real is that? How real is that? And the fact is that, all it is plum appointments by the chair of the GVD, plum appointments, and these plum appointments, who knows, you look at their expense accounts, and they're just running wild. $800 million budget. And how is it policed? By nobody that's elected. And how are the salaries set? For the board or the employees? Who knows? I still haven't known. But I'll tell you, I'm going to ask Friday, because it's on the agenda on Friday at least. I looked at it today, and my God, there's nobody under $75,000 to $80,000 plus benefits. There's nobody. And the whole 700 employees or whatever they have in there. So it really is frightening. And the fact is, I couldn't get straight to Mayor. We know that they have a fire department in there. I don't know whether the firemen, what kind of salary they get at the GVD, because if they have fire trucks, they must have fire department. They must have manned fire department. So see what happens. Those are things I'm going to be asking on Friday. But it's frightening what's happening, I'll tell you.
Just for clarification,
so I don't mind to discuss it 2 weeks from now at all, providing it's going to be discussed and that we can make it, that you don't need a notice of motion. If you need a notice of motion, I'll serve it tonight.
Okay, no, we don't need one. We've referred, or the motion is to refer it to a future council meeting, which accomplishes the same thing, and I think it's the appropriate. I just want a clarification. I don't want to be unfair to anyone over at Metro Vancouver. I gather that they're governed by the same legislation that requires all local governments to report anyone on a list, a long list of everyone in the organization that earns more than $75,000 a year. So by definition, everyone on the list earns more than $75,000 a year, and that's why that list is out. There are other people in the organization that earn less than that, and they wouldn't be on the list, and so their salaries are actual private matters. But under legislation, we're in the same boat. We have to report everybody that's over 75,000.
200 that are about 100 and some odd thousand.
Yep. Councillor, this is on the motion to refer. Councillor Lynch.
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite happy with the motion referred. That was the content of my discussion around the previous motion. And my issue somewhat is the timing. I know that we need to make a decision, then we have to formulate the question. We have to do so in time for the city clerk to be able to develop that and do the processes he has to do. So I certainly wouldn't want, I was going to speak against any motion to a notice of motion or anything like that if it was.
Mr. Gilbert, timing, when does the window shut?
I think as we've communicated to council previously, I think we would benefit from having it before the summer break. That gives us the summer break to do the logistical stuff and the preparations that we need to do. I think a referral to the meeting of July 4th provides that time, and if council felt that they wanted to wordsmith as either as a collective group or as a subgroup, we do have a strategic priorities meeting on July 11th scheduled at this time, so there is time to refine the question if that was also.
Thank you. That was the date I was looking for. I was looking for some type of time frame in the motion. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I fully support this motion to refer. I think we do need to discuss this issue. I agree with the concerns that have been expressed by Councillor Lynch and Councillor Sikora. Having said that, I also agree exactly with what Councillor Reid has said as well. I think that we need some sort of strategy around this particular issue, because if we just go out to our citizens and ask them, well, do you want your Metro Vancouver reps directly elected, and they say yes, well, that's fine, then what do we do with that? And so I think we really need to think ahead on this before we do take this out to our electorate. And I think by referring it and having a discussion on the issue, we'll be better prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, I supported the motion to refer mostly because I'd like to get more information about this. I'm also concerned, as Councillor Reid had mentioned, about sort of the timing and what does it mean and what are the implications, as Councillor Reamer pointed out. But I'm particularly interested in the notion of democracy and accountability. And how does that play out when it comes to Metro? So those are some of the things that I'm going to be looking for in our discussion when we actually have this come forward on a council agenda in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. I have no problem referring this on and for have a greater discussion around this issue. I think, as the Mayor pointed out, there's issues of governance that play into effect at Metro Vancouver, and I think one of the issues that would be helpful just outside of the election issue is to have the Provincial Auditor General review the whole operation of Metro Vancouver for all the issues that we've talked about here, to give that independent look. That has been done before in different agencies, and I think years ago the Auditor General used to have the funding and the ability to audit local government, but that budget was removed. I think it's time the province brought back that ability for the Auditor General to review local government, and especially starting with the largest one here, Metro Vancouver, and I think it would be a benefit to everybody. And I think one step in looking at how we do things, but I think if we decide to do some sort of election here, I think there should be consistency throughout the region, as Councillor Reid pointed out, moving on this direction. So, but we'll discuss those issues. Those are comments that come up. I think it's an idea that we need to discuss more thoroughly, and we'll refer this on for that further discussion.
Well, I think it's very timely right now because people are paying their taxes. Look on your tax notice and you'll see line items from 2 unelected bodies that get to add to your taxes for your home property taxes. It is a big issue. Motion is to refer this issue to the council meeting of July 4th. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 15 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services meeting of Monday, June 13th. Recommendations to receive.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
First item of business arising out of that committee's meeting is their recommendation regarding the library's request to repurpose 2005 funding. Recommendation of the committee is that council approves the library's request to repurpose funds in order to support the current radio frequency identification project.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, who's the chair actually, or who sits on the library board. Second by Councillor Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item pertains to the cultural and fee-for-service policy update. The committee's recommendation is that council approve the revised cultural organization operating grant policy and approve the revised community fee-for-service policy.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. And this is through the staff. We already have a lot of processes for community groups, and adding to this now, is there going to be much more involvement here for community groups to do paperwork, more processes to follow? Like I say, they already have a lot, and I don't want to start burdening them with more. And as a matter of fact, it looks like here for the audits, I don't want to see us having to charge these people for these community groups for audits and then have them, because it's going to cost them, ask for more money for the community capital fund to fund these audits. So is there any clarity around this here?
Through the chair, the policy actually reduces the requirement for community groups. We've stuck with audits for the large cultural groups that operate our facilities, but the smaller community groups, we've relaxed the requirement, so it's actually a little bit easier for them.
Perfect. Perfect. So there's not as many big reports for them for follow-up. And is there more of a cost there for them now?
Actually, it will actually save them money.
Perfect.
Because it'll be cheaper for them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, 2 good answers. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. I was just looking under the policy procedure manual under performance measures. It talks about note that review engagements are audited are both acceptable. Now there is another level, I believe it's called the notice to reader for small organizations. Would that be acceptable?
It would not be acceptable for the large cultural groups that run our facilities, but for the other groups that would be acceptable.
Smaller ones?
Yep.
So that would be much more...
much more cost effective for them.
Oh, no.
Okay. Thank you very much. Motion. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether I wasn't listening clearly when Councillor Lynch was speaking. But I think what he asked was whether there were some circumstances in which we would accept notice to reader or compilation engagements in accountantees from groups submitting for these grants, rather than review engagements. And did I hear a positive response? It seemed to me that this policy said audits for the large, reviews for the others.
Yes, and we would accept notice to readers or even no financial statements for the people who got the other kinds of grants where we give it for a specific item, because in those cases what we do is we accept actual receipts, and then if we actually request the money back if they don't spend the full amount of money.
And so, in effect, we do our own auditing in those circumstances.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
There we go. All clarified? Okay, motion before us. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to reports of staff. Item 16 is the 2010 Annual Development Cost Charges Report. The recommendations that Council receive this report.
Moved by Councillor Asmunsen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 17 is the 2010 Statement of Financial Information. The recommendation is that Council receive this report.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 18 pertains to traffic management issues, and this is on Coast Meridian Road and David Avenue in an incident of April 30th. The recommendation is that Council receive this report.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 19 is the City Centre Pay Parking Management Strategy. Recommendations that Council receive this report.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Asmunsen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are no further formal items on the agenda.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Further to what Ms. McLeod said earlier, I just wanted to thank, I would assume it's communications, for these lovely pictures that are in the brochures. It really, I can't remember seeing our city showcased so well, and it just looks lovely. And I especially love the fountain, Laurie McKay, thank you. But it is really lovely, and the park, I mean, they're just stunning. So thank you very much.
That would be the fountain that you proposed.
I did not propose to a fountain. Yes.
Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I have a question through to staff here, Parks and Rec. It's that time of year, it's the end of the year. Our pools are open, the kids are getting out of school. Are we giving passes again this year to school children?
Ms. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is. School year is coming to an end. That is a time to celebrate. And at the end of the school year, it has been the practice, and it will continue to be the practice in 2011, for the city to distribute information to all of the students that includes a courtesy pass for one visit to our outdoor pools in the summer. So it's a bit of recognition for the students' hard work. It's also to reintroduce them to summer fun and active lifestyles in the summer, and we encourage them and their families to come and enjoy our wonderful outdoor pools. At the same time this year, we're also, with that courtesy pass, promoting our unlimited seasons pass that we will be offering to Coquitlam residents this year. It's a very good value. Unlimited swimming in outdoor pools for our residents for the low cost of $25 for a season's pass for a child, or $50 for an adult pass. It represents a very good value, and we hope that Coquitlam residents really take advantage of what our outdoor pools have to offer.
And I hope the sun cooperates.
Sorry, for only $50, you can go swimming any day of the year, any day of the summer, actually.
We're looking forward to seeing members of council, whether you walk, run, cycle, or roll, to outdoor pools every day. We're open 7 days a week.
Or roll. Thank you very much. Outstanding. Any further comments from council? A motion to adjourn would be in order. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. As is common, we'll open the floor to any questions on tonight's agenda. Questions? Thank you very much. Have a good evening, all.